Drive, brought to you by Golf Pride.
Welcome into this weekend edition of Morning Drive. Gary Williams alongside my partners, Matt Adams and Jaime Diaz. And guys, let's talk about something that has been the overriding theme of the updates that we've been doing for the last several weeks, scheduling when it comes to amateur golf and professional golf. This past Thursday, Golfweek published a report on their website regarding the governing bodies getting ready to basically release the revised schedule, the impending release of this schedule. And as we look at what they reported, it includes what is currently still the dates for the U.S. Open and the Open Championships. Of course, that Father's Day weekend in June at Winged Foot, and then also the Open Championship, the 149th edition at Royal St. George's. Beyond that, the PGA Championship, they're saying, is going to be in August. That first full week in August, the Tour Championship. It's going to push back a week to September 3rd to the 6th, and the Ryder Cup going to stay, at least according to them, based on their sourcing they have in the date they have at the end of September, and then finally the Masters with that date, which would be about 10 days prior to Thanksgiving. So with that report, Jaime, this is something we've all talked about, speculated on. When the PGA Tour does in fact resume, whether it be at the Charles Schwab Challenge, which is currently the next event that they still have on their schedule, which is May 21st to the 24th, or whenever it might be, how should the Tour prioritize their events around the major championships that they are trying to salvage, all these governing bodies?
Well, it's going to be complicated, Gary, but it all depends on when the Tour starts to play again, certainly. If it is mid-June, you're going to miss some big events like the Memorial, for example. Should that be carried over into the new start? You might want to do that in terms of cherry-picking the most prestigious events, the ones that have, the most importance to the players. Memorial probably would qualify for that. Might push another tournament out aside. At the same time, you want to know what at the end of the season might be available in terms of perhaps football being either postponed or canceled and leaving a vacuum that golf could fill aggressively with more events, and maybe even the wraparound season starts at that point. But I think going in the middle of the season, you're talking about, playing the WC FedEx at Memphis. Certainly, that would be a priority event, I think. And I think you want to maybe try to get a playoff event and certainly have some kind of season finale with the Tour Championship. It would be truncated. It would be a different animal, but it would be an end to what, has been would be a very fortuitous situation to have a golf season at all. And I think it symbolically would be nice to do that. But, in general, we want to prioritize so that the majors can be played. And if the Ryder Cup gets bumped out of there, so be it. But the majors probably would be the thing that you want to make room for. What are you thinking, Matt?
Fascinating observations, Jaime. The one about how other sports are going to impact the competitive environment at the end of this year is going to be fascinating as well. Because remember, they're all trying to make up for lost time as well. Maybe have competitions that don't allow as many people into the stadiums, etc. We'll see how all that plays itself out. As to golf, when we talk about prioritizing the events that lead to majors, as the season continues to shrink, there'll be less and less opportunity for those events on the front end of said majors, rush to majors, as Jaime put it recently. I think that what we're going to see is that week before the Ryder Cup, it was talked about there that the Open may stay there, but if the Open moves, the U.S. Open may grab that space so that the U.S. Open can stay at Winged Foot. If the U.S. Open gets pushed to later in the season, they're expecting that it may have to go out, say, to California and have multiple golf courses that they can compete on to try to get these fields through, because we're starting to deal with daylight at that time of year as well. I can't say this as a person that's managed facilities in the Northeast. It's the perfect time of year to play a golf tournament in September. The greens are absolutely perfect. It's a question, I think, as much about logistics. So, Gary, it's about where you're going to fit all this stuff in. I think one of the things that they have to look at is to say, whoa, abandon the idea of the wraparound this year and extend this season all the way to December 31st. That gives you, we've already seen it, the LPGA is having a major in December. That gives you, after Thanksgiving, all those weeks to pick up events as well, even if you have to bump some of the fall events in order to make room for some big events that they want to have postponed or they want to have in this calendar year leading to those majors. I think they can fit more in. It is definitely going to be tight.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to assume that some of the events that would be part of the wraparound, that their official dates have not been released by the PGA Tour with respect to what would be the 2021 PGA Tour schedule, but they do all have dates on their websites, with the exception of the one event, the CJ Cup at Nine Bridges, which they may change the locale of that event. I will say this: the first thing I think the PGA Tour should do is just tell every member, whatever their status might be, that this truncated schedule, you're going to be a member next season. I would go ahead and resolve that now. However many starts the membership of the PGA Tour gets, that's great. But you are not going to be relegated back to the Korn Ferry Tour. Korn Ferry Tour current members there are not going to be elevated to the PGA Tour. That's just the consequences and basically the impact of what we're dealing with now. The other thing that I would say is I think it is the necessity and the right thing to do to prioritize these major championship events. And again, like I said, you're talking about really kind of not giving a number of your members of the PGA Tour a lot of starts. Masters short field, qualifying with respect to the U.S. Open. And with that being said, Jaime, the USGA, they canceled their local qualifying. They have 12 what are now called final qualifying sites. Used to be called sectional qualifying. It's now called final qualifying because they have international sites. They have one in Japan. They have one in England, not to mention all the ones domestically here in the United States. What do you think they should do in addition to how should the European Tour and the PGA of America alter their qualifications for their respective Ryder Cup teams?
Well, I think everything's got to be considered in context, and it's very reasonable that things would be shortened in some way. I don't think there'll be an asterisk after the U.S. Open because the qualifying system was a little different. It's very reasonable to me that they have just a sectional essentially as opposed to any local qualifying, and the U.S. Open will still be the U.S. Open. Let's face it, very few players have ever come out of local qualifying to win the U.S. Open, so I don't think the championship would lose anything. As far as the Ryder Cup, it's interesting. I think it's an opportunity perhaps to exercise that fantasy that a lot of captains had over the years is let me pick all 12 players. And Padraig Harrington has voiced that sort of preference in a perfect world. I don't think it would cheapen at all the Ryder Cup. But if not, just leave the qualifying points in place where they are, and whoever makes the team makes the team. I don't think there would be a problem with that. The only thing about the Ryder Cup, of course, is maybe it shouldn't be played this year. And if that were the case, that would follow precedent for what happened after 9/11 in 2001, where they didn't play and they went to 2002. Nothing was lost. Actually, this would put the Ryder Cup, if they did skip, back on schedule with the odd years as it was originally conceived.
Yeah, it's the first time in 1927, the odd year that they had it. It was adjusted, as Jaime noted, after 9/11. I think there's a couple things to observe here. First of all, with the U.S. Open, we're in an extraordinary time. If they had to go to a decision to say the top 100 ranked as of get into the U.S. Open, and that's your field, it's a limited field in the U.S. Open, it is what it is. As Jaime just noted, it generally comes from the top 20 or 30 players in the world that contend. Anyway, as far as the Ryder Cup goes, we're at 45% of the way of this wraparound season right now, considering the fact that some of those events are alternate field events. We're actually closer to 50%. The U.S. Ryder Cup team right now would be Brooks, DJ, Patrick Reed, Gary Woodland, Xander Schauffele, Webb Simpson, Justin Thomas, and Tiger Woods. The next four are Finau, Kuchar, DeChambeau, and Cantlay. Kisner and Ricky are 13th and 14th. We're in pretty good shape as it stands even at the moment. You could just let it go, accrue points for whatever events they have prior to the Ryder Cup, and then see how it settles out. I think we're okay, and I think everybody realizes that these are extraordinary times. Where do you fall on it all, Gare?
I think what you said, Matt, about if they make the alteration to the U.S. Open and you don't have nearly as many opportunities through the qualifying process, no, it wouldn't be as open per se, but these are extraordinary circumstances. Steve Jones, Lucas Glover, Michael Campbell in the modern era through sectional qualifying, as it was called. Now it's final qualifying, wound up winning it. Orville Moody in 1969 in the modern era, local and sectional qualifying, and he wound up winning the event. I have no problem with that. One thing I would say, back to Jaime's point about the Ryder Cup, with diminishing diminishing returns in terms of being able to get qualifying points to accrue to make it on the automatic side. With diminishing returns, I'd give more latitude to the captains. But I will say this, if the Ryder Cup cannot be the Ryder Cup, and what I mean is, if fans are not permitted, if the circumstances in our country are such that this is going to be a quarantine event, they should push it to next year. The Ryder Cup is something that is special primarily because of the home field advantage, depending on where it's being played. If it is just a respite of solitude for these players, I won't like that procession at all, and it would be too reflective of the times. They should push it to 21 if in fact that is the case. Of course, we sit here and wait every day in a trivial sense for these scheduling announcements to be made, but for now, for Matt and Jaime, I'm Gary. Now, every day on Morning Drive, 7 days a week, and Golf Central updates as well. We'll keep you updated. For now, stay safe and be well.